Welcome and be inspired with Dominik. And today we're going to make this peanut-shaped bowl for peanuts. But first, we need to address the elephant in the room. It comes up whenever I put a bowl of peanuts in my shop. Then this happens. Terrible, right? And then, when cleaning up the mess... Oops. Sorry. Anyway, let's make a new bowl. The technique I'm going to use works on many other shapes as well, as long as they do not have undercuts. Fun fact, the ancient Greeks used it to make armor with it. Which is a little bit nuts if you think about it, but speaking as someone who has seen what it can do, it checks out. First of all, I make a peanut shape on the lathe from a block of fur. This may not be the prettiest thing that I've ever turned, but it's certainly close. No wait, that's not what I meant to say, it's the nuttiest one. Okay, probably not that either. Despite this being merely a kind of mold, I sand the surface and wax it to make things easier later. After taking it off the lathe, I cut off the excess and use the belt sander to shape both ends, and add flat spots to one side so that it does not roll away. The main ingredient for this is fabric. I use linen cloth, but other materials that are not waterproof should work as well. The size of the strips I cut from the cloth are a matter of taste for the most part, so feel free to experiment, but do not eat them. Now things are going to get messy. A layer of plastic protects my workbench, and gloves make sure that I can wash my hands of this project a little more easily afterwards. At least literally. First, I cover the wooden peanut with petroleum jelly as a kind of mold release. That probably means the sanding was in vain, but sanding and waxing on the lathe are such satisfying experiences, I did not want to miss them. But that was not the actual messy part. Now, the pieces of cloth get soaked in wood glue and applied to the wooden peanut. You might have seen the same technique used in craft projects for kids using strips of newspaper and wallpaper glue. I keep on adding pieces, flattening them against the nut. You will get bends and kinks, but they do not matter as long as you can flatten them against the form, which works best if you have enough glue on there. After a couple of layers, I let the whole thing dry. Later on, I add another bunch of layers just to make sure the walls are thick enough. I let the peanut rest for a few days to make sure the glue has set up properly. Then I mark the center line using a felt tip marker and an appropriate spacer. This line is where I need to cut. First, I tried with a cutting disc in a rotary tool, but this is definitely not an ideal tool for this. So let's have some overkill. I used the flat face of the form to write against my table saw fence and raise the blade slowly. This is not a shape that screams table saw safety, so be careful and make sure to keep your hands away from the blade. I usually recommend using push sticks, but with that shape they are probably more dangerous than using your hands. As always, no matter what you see on YouTube, you need to be the judge of what you actually do yourself. I stick to the table saw until I've cut through the center section. Then I switch to a handsaw for the rest. And with a screwdriver and a little coercion, the halves come apart. Removing the petroleum jelly residue works best using acetone or paint thinner after removing the bulk with paper towels. As for the wooden nut, you can declare it firewood now. Or go really nuts, repair the table saw damage using sawdust and glue, and use it again. Moving on to the proverbial peanut shell, I use scissors to remove what on a metal piece you would call the burr. To make the cut edge more pretty, I add another strip to it all the way around. For the lip of the bowl, I take a wide long strip, add glue and fold it in half. After it dries, it is still flexible enough for what comes next. Using clamps, I attach this lip to one side of the bowl, letting it extend about a centimeter or a third of an inch. It does not have to be a perfect fit, but I try to get it as close as I can. It might take a little tweaking to get the halves to fit, but believe me, it can be done. So let's test the new bowl. It fills rather nicely, just as if the peanuts feel the kinship to the bowl, which, as theories go, is completely and utterly nuts. Now back to the elephant in the room. So, at the very least, it takes much longer for the mess to happen. That's something. And here we are. So, safety advice, you're supposed to peel them. Nobody tells you. Anyway, I like how this bowl or box or whatever you want to call it turned out. And the technique is pretty versatile. This material is sturdy, has a very little flex or bend to it, but still enough that you can actually bend it, like the lip here, to get a good fit. I hope you enjoyed watching this. If you did, please share it with your friends on whatever social media you want. And also subscribe to my channel on YouTube, because, well, that's where this video lives. And while you're subscribing, why not also subscribe to my newsletter on my homepage, where you can also find a post about this with a few additional information, behind the scenes stuff, and whatever else I can think of. And there you'll find my newsletter, which you should also subscribe to stay up to date. There's a lot of subscribing going on. Just keep subscribing, you can't go wrong with it. Thanks for watching, and as always, remember to be inspired. Where did the peanut go? Come on, you can't hide from me. I got all your friends.